Hey there, it's Ron Wasserman, and you're watching John the Ninja. You better be watching John the Ninja. Watch John the Ninja.
Ladies and gentlemen, how you doing? It's John the Ninja live on the Dojo, aka the Dojang, aka the John the Ninja Studios, man, and you know this! And I want to thank you for joining me on another monumental interview. The person I'm sitting with right now was my first interview ever. If you didn't hear about all his accolades, that means you didn't watch the video prior to, so go back, watch that video, and then watch this one. This guy is phenomenal. And when I say I was so genuinely excited to speak to him, I started talking, and all of a sudden, I couldn't speak English, so I tried Spanish, a little bit of the German and French I know, nothing. But, as always, to break character and tell you who I'm sitting with, this man is none other than the music legend, Ron Wasserman. Yes, Ron Wasserman speaking with me again. And let me go over a quick little run through. He's worked with every big notable name you can think of, whether it's in music, whether it is in TV, film. He's met them all. Cedric the Entertainer. Golly, this man's met Ozzy Osborne and even played music with Eddie Van Halen. Him and his wife had the band Fisher, which were phenomenal. Not only in the fact that they were the first band to cash in on the MP3 internet craze of the 1990s that pretty much kicked off everything's like iTunes, Spotify, and all that, but that band by itself has reached over 1 million listens to on Spotify alone. That's also not mentioning the work he's done with Saban, NBC, ABC, all these shows, naming out Dragon Ball Z, SpongeBob, and a slew of others. Hot in Cleveland tends to be the one most people remember right off the top of the head because, they're all in that age group. Or if you want to go the Thundermans, it's a lot of work he has encompassed, and so thankful he's taken the time out of his busy schedule to talk to me. So, ladies and gentlemen, Ron, how are you doing? Hey, man.
Good.
No, I know you're adopted. I did not know this. It is crazy to think that with everything your family story has, and then I look at your story, a lot of factors had to hit just right. Like your mom and dad hit it off when they were in their 20s, I believe.
Yeah.
And sitting there, it's like the family didn't like him, and then he went off to World War II, but was medically discharged. They got together. They couldn't have kids, and you were the product of an affair, and your uncle was a lawyer, and he set that up for them to be able to adopt you. What was that upbringing like for you?
It was great. My mom was kind of a genius and had a lot of mental issues at the same time. She was agoraphobic, so at 3 p.m. every day, for example, the drapes were all drawn.
Mhm.
And I was never out unless I was with them. I was never out past dusk until I was 14 on my own. So had to be in very protective. But at the same time, on her brilliant side, she had taught me so much about English and got me in front of a typewriter and taught me how to type because she said, computers are coming and you're going to need this someday. You'll thank me. At the time I hated her guts. I was just had to type up for a half hour a day. And playing piano, she never had to tell me to do. I, out of the crib, was trying to get to the record player, and she said I slept with records instead of stuffed animals. And any radio in the house, I was just constantly messing with. And so playing piano was never a problem. The first piano they got me, I think I was 3 years old. And I remember looking out of the back of this old Oldsmobile and this U-Haul trailer. We bought this upright black piano for $25. That was just in horrid shape. And my dad did the best he could to glue new tops on the keys. They were ivory keys back then, and kind of tried to tune it. And, it was horrible, but I played that thing till my fingers bled. And then when I was about 6, my uncle, who had arranged the whole adoption with another lawyer in Los Angeles, my uncle bought me a used Wurlitzer Spinet, which I still have. And I played that thing to death. It's really all I wanted to do. But as far as my upbringing, my folks were wonderful. My mom was just, it was like growing up in a minimum security prison, sort of. If it was today, she would have had 4 Nest cams in my room watching me all the time. And my dad was just like floating around having a good time.
What is your name on the certificate, Baby Boy Lowery?
My biological father's name was Dean Clyde Lowery.
Okay.
And my mother's last name, I believe, I'm sorry, it's been a long time, was Palumbo. So they were those two, but they were both German. So I guess I'm German. I've never done a 23andMe or anything. I kind of don't want to know.
I figured German because Wasserman, that's waterman in German. I know
Yeah.
a little bit to get away with it.
When my grandparents came over on Ellis Island, it was some other complicated name, and they just renamed the family right there, as they did. They did that all the time.
Okay. Were you able to go to Ellis Island and see the name in the book?
No, I haven't done that yet. I took the cruise around it, but I haven't been there yet because yeah, it was just last time I was there. That's the only time we had to kind of mess around and tour things.
So your dad and your uncle were actually, your dad was trying to be an actor.
Yeah.
And your uncle was an actor. I think it was the Where's the Beef commercial for Wendy's.
Yeah, it's crazy. My uncle always wanted to be an actor. Here's some more dysfunctional family stuff. So my uncle always wanted to be an actor, but his parents said, "No, you're going to be a lawyer, and that's it." So he got a job at a law firm in Chicago delivering subpoenas when he was 14, which is pretty dangerous for a 14-year-old. But anyways, that's what he did. He stayed at that firm with the same boss until he retired in his 70s. So he spent his entire career there. Absolutely wild. But my dad, who, did blue collar work when I was growing up, when he retired early because he kept breaking, he was a little clumsy, kept breaking his wrists and like damage his legs. So that he retired early. He worked his ass off to get into acting. But sorry, Dad, he was terrible.
Okay.
I mean, he ended up with Billy doing a couple bit parts with Billy Crystal and whatnot, but it just never got going. My uncle now is a full-time lawyer in Chicago. He's walking down the street in the 70s, and this guy walks up to him and says, "Have you ever wanted to act?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I do commercials. I love your look." He ended up doing 397 national spots, not just with this guy. Every time I turned on the TV in the 70s, a commercial break, he was on something for General Motors or Wendy's or any of that. So he made it, which pissed my dad off, but it was pretty fun.
So I vaguely remember a story. Did your dad take you to an audition where either it was a porn shoot or a porn shoot was in the other room?
Oh, it was a porn shoot.
Oh, so it was just straight up. He was an extra in it.
We went to this house in Los Angeles, this huge house that was unfurnished, well, except the bedroom. And there's this long hallway, and my dad's walking down the hallway in a fire suit, the silver things they wear.
Mhm.
And I haven't got I'm maybe 5 or 6. I haven't got a fucking clue what's going on. And I just noticed as he comes down the hallway towards the camera with his arms up, there's this naked guy running across behind him. So obviously this was somebody's brilliant concept to start a porn film. And then he finished his part, and I just remember walking into this bedroom, and it's just fully decorated with candles. And I remember saying, "Can we stay and see what they're going to shoot here?" And he just kind of grabbed me and dragged me out. But I was on a lot of student film sets and all sorts of things as a kid with him. So being a kid on a set, everybody treats you really, really well. So that was super fun.
That probably would explain why you were so into cameras growing up too, trying to do pictures of your friends and then edit it to music. Because everyone's already aware of your story of, playing at 3, already had your first paid gig, not like gig as reoccurring, but you already had the tablature, the exercise book that was 5. So with your upbringing, it seems like you're in a pretty diverse community, a lot of Hispanics, Black.
Totally.
Being that we're guessing you're German and then your parents were Russian Jews, how beneficial was that to you growing up, being surrounded by a little bit of everything? And were you guys practicing the faith as well? Like, would you guys have Shabbat?
Very little. No, it was when my grandmother was in town, we do the Seder and do everything. But in general, no, we didn't really practice anything. And back then, the neighborhood was incredibly diverse, so we were all pretty rude to each other about whatever our backgrounds were, which of course today then you'd have to go to therapy and they'd beat you up or whatever they would do. But back then, we had no problem calling each other ethnic names as we're riding bikes or skateboards or hanging out. But it was the best possible upbringing for a kid it could be. Because I mean, it was, I just can't describe it. You had, everything was covered, so nobody grew up in their all white or all Hispanic or all black neighborhood. So it was really great. It was out in the San Fernando Valley in a place called Mission Hills on a street called Tuba Street.
You had two stories, because I remember in 2018 you were posting just certain excerpts about your life. And the two that caught me the most, other than like the very traumatic times in your life, and then the other times we'll reach the good times too later. You had two female friends, I believe. One was Nancy. You used to ride bikes with her.
Yeah.
The other one was a girl who was said to be mentally challenged, and you didn't catch it at first. And I wanted you to elaborate. What about those stories at that time made you think, you know what, I should probably write this down? Because you said your gut was telling you to write it. Yeah, I even had to put a post like, I'm not suicidal, I'm not losing it, but I feel I have to get these stories out. So what about those two stories made you say this would be a good one to express?
Yeah. I'll start off by saying in 2018, I think it was, or late 2017, when I started writing this stuff, I mean, things were going pretty well, but other things were not. So I was getting a bit dark. So what I started doing, I had never ever gone out alone to like a bar or restaurant. And I found this place by me and it was great. I would just sit there and sip bourbon. And I just pulled up the phone and decided I'm just going to kind of write my life story for no other reason. So my son has it. So all of that was written, because I can't even type with two fingers on the phone, with one finger on the phone. But going up to those two girls, yeah, it was pretty awful. One I used to ride bikes with all the time, and we'd kind of sneak off to this Pierce College that had these hills. It's out in the valley. And one time I went over to her house, and there was a bunch of cars, and I went up and I went to go see where she was, and she had been riding there. Yes, just pre-helmets, and she crashed and smashed her head open and died there. And I was that was pretty upsetting. And the other girl was prior to that. We were in kindergarten. It was the first day. I can still see it. And they handed us on brown construction paper a picture of a bunny. And your job was to take the scissors and just cut out the bunny. And now mine was probably still lame. I can't even draw stick people, but I cut around the bunny. And I noticed she was cutting hers into little squares. But she was so cute, this little blonde girl. You just fall in love instant. You don't even know what love is, but you're in love. And the next day she was gone. I asked the teacher and they said, she's in another class. And I found out later on, or my mom found out, that she had been put in a special needs school. And it just broke my heart. Here was the love of my life. I'd known her since recess, and here you go, she's gone. So it had a real effect. And that was a different part of the valley, and it was pretty freaking rough.
I don't have any stories even close to that. I have one I remember as a kid where there was a girl, she was deaf. And the first time I met her, we're talking, we're playing. I had to have been like second, first grade. But she had hearing aids. And it's like when she clicked it, she was speaking. The first time we hung out, she was speaking. She could hear me. I could hear her. It was like nothing had happened.
Right.
We understood each other perfectly. Perfect English for kids. And then the next day, she couldn't speak. Like she was unable to audibly get the words out. And I was so confused. I was like, well, what happened? That's the only thing I have remotely close to that. So
but it sticks with you for life. It really does.
On to a happier note, I want to talk about your friend who was friends with, I think it was the drummer of Chicago. And
no, it was the oh my God, boy, you've done your research. Yeah, it was the keyboard player.
So who was your friend?
Robert E. Lee.
Oh, that's
And
hilarious.
he lived, this is still in the rough neighborhood. There was this one old Victorian house. The rest were all 50s little cracker box, not manufactured, whatever they did. They look slightly different, but, really cheap houses. But apparently this house had been in that part of the valley a long time. So it was a big 2-story Victorian house it was just, the guy was amazing. So one day we just got it in our head. I don't even know how we knew where to send it. We wrote a letter to, excuse me, the keyboard player of Chicago. And the guy wrote us back. He said, I'm on a plane and thank you for your letter. And he wrote us back. And years later, I always remembered that. It was such a big deal. And years later, I made a point to answer, because of what he did, to answer every single message, email that I would ever get with anybody who was saying, I liked your work or had a question about it or anything like that. And I've done it to this day. And it's a lot of damn emails.
But I remember, so circa 2016, we were having a conversation, and we didn't touch necessarily on that letter, but we did touch on, you went through so much in your career. And I think the statement that killed me and my, at the time, Stanley the Prophet, all you listeners know who he is, but he was the guy who was co-hosting, asking most of the questions with me. You told us that, you were at a point where you're like, wow, I thought I could not have as many more knives in my back as I do now. So that's why you make it a point to always help people, because you really
Yeah.
didn't have the mentor or have somebody really stick out their neck for you like that. So now we're going to hit high school. I heard that you model student. You can't sleep other than your musical prowess and your ability to, be really good at it. It seems like you just kind of pissed off all the classes. Like
Yeah. I
you
was
got
terrible.
to school, you were playing piano all the time, and like teachers were like, you passed this test, you're good. And you were like, bet.
It's amazing.
It befuddles me how good you have to be at all subjects for that. So I was curious, like, was it like, okay, you were good at a little bit of everything, or you were just really smart in classes, you just didn't care? Where would you classify yourself?
Well, this is LA City schools in the 70s. So my son, who is now 17, I could not understand when he was in 3rd or 4th grade. I could already not help him with his math homework. What he was doing then was more advanced than what we were doing in high school. I mean, there were some kids that took advanced math, for example, but I just stuck with basic math, and the requirements were pretty simple. Plus, I'd been pushed ahead. So I'm starting high school at 13 years old. So that's a weird social disconnect right there. So what I did is my friend and I, we joined the sound crew, and that gave us keys to the whole school.
Mhm.
So I started cutting class. I mean, I was always, show up at homeroom, do the roll call, and then I would just cut classes. I'd go into the auditorium. I had the keys because there's nothing going on in there. And off to the right of the stage were these 2 low doors. I just pull out the grand piano a little bit, and just sat there and played all day. So the drama teacher there knew I was there, and she would help cover for me. Sometimes I wouldn't go to class for as much as 5-6 weeks. And then I'd show up and they'd say, Wasserman, we knew where you were. And they'd hand me a test, and 90% of the time I'd pass it. So I just kind of muddled my way through the whole high school experience. What I did was so wrong. So wrong. But the classes I always went to were like photography, that I never missed a single one. Anything to do with the arts, astronomy, stuff like that. But when it came to the boring shit, I just couldn't stomach it.
No, man, I got to give you credit for that, because I went to every class. I was a bad student. College, high school, it didn't matter. I slept in classes I wanted to learn in. So
Yeah.
the fact that you were able to get away with that, it's just like, damn.
Barely, but I graduate high school on my photography portfolio. Then I get accepted to Cal Arts, which is owned by Disney out in Valencia, California, which is like sort of a grad school. It's where you go after you've done the regular college, and then you're going to go there and really dig into the arts. But I'm starting this where everybody's 22, 25 or older.
Hmm.
I'm 17, so I'm scared out of my wits because now I remember my first day in line to register. I'm just surrounded by all these incredibly artistic people. I'd never really looked or acted that way. So I am crawling out of my skin, but I found my group and I did photography there. And I did that for just a year and a half. I ran out of money. I knew I was going to run out of money. But again, I did my photography. I went to all my classes this time because they were all so cool. But all I did was sit in the ballet studio and play piano all day.
Hmm.
So my teachers would say, "Why aren't you taking music here?" And I said, "Well, I just do it. It's not something I want. I don't want to learn the mechanics of it. It just kind of pours out."
And back then they were all very, it's got to be the theory. You can't do it any other way. You got to read the music. So we're going to sidetrack. We're going to go back what
Sure.
you did after college, but you have a very musical, diverse taste. And the bands
Very.
that keep on popping up, Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
You've met Ozzy.
Yeah.
I want to know three things off this band, and then we'll hop on to the other musical artist. One, what was the first Sabbath song you heard? Two, top album or one that you love the most? And then three, what the hell was that situation where you had a message from Eddie Van Halen to talk to Ozzy? Like, I'm assuming that was the first time you met him, but
Yeah.
you always have these wild stories. Oh yeah, Eddie was like, ah, shit, that's how he did it. Or Bob Ezrin, or Matt Sorum's story catching you in LA,
Yeah.
or like even you got to meet Carol Burnett. I'm very upset about that. I
Oh,
have
yeah.
this on that. So what's your Sabbath Ozzy stories?
So I had when the band Fisher with my ex-wife got signed to Interscope Universal, and the album came out. Valerie Bertinelli, it turns out, was a big fan. She had even found our indie stuff that we'd released prior. So she had the director put one of our songs in one of her movie of the week things. I think it was called Simply Yours or something.
Mhm.
So our manager called and said, "Hey, Valerie wants to know if you want to come up to the estate and watch the movie with them tonight." We're like, "Hell yeah." So we go up and we're sitting on the couch. She's a doll. And she and my wife are really hitting it off because there's no competition with two women. They're just going like that.
Mhm.
And I just hear psst, psst, and I turn around and there's fucking Eddie Van Halen behind me. And he goes, "Come with me, come with me." And he pulls me into the kitchen and he opens up the freezer and pulls out a baggie. He goes, "Do you know what this is?" I said, "It's a bone." He goes, "It's my hip bone. I wrote 'not for soup' on it." And he and I just hit it off. He got kind of pissed at me at first because I don't know what happened. We were just talking about music and he goes, "Well, you haven't mentioned it yet, but I was in a little band called Van Halen. Ever heard of them?" I'm like, "Yeah." "What do you want me to do? Kiss your ass?" "I'm not going to kiss your ass. You're the best guitar player on the planet." I didn't feel I needed to tell you that. Just like you didn't need to tell me I'm the best looking guy on earth, right? Or whatever. I don't know what I said. Something ridiculous. So we just hit it off, and then he gave me a full tour of the property. The highlights were, he said, "Come on down this hall." I mean, it's like you're walking down a hallway in a house, and he goes, "Open that door." And I open up the door, and it's a fucking racquetball court with just a cajillion cables and all these amps in it. And those are just what he'll plug into from the studio if he feels like getting a big echoey sound. He said, "I don't use it much, but that's what I do." And then on the house, I seem to remember it was like two big garages, another guest house, and then 5150, the studio.
Mhm.
So we went through and I saw he had 22 classic cars that were just outrageous. And then we went up to the studio and he said, "I feel like drumming." So I sat on the piano. I'm like terrified, but calm. And I just started playing, and he just started drumming, and I just couldn't kind of wrap my head around that Eddie Van Halen is playing drums while I play piano. So I ended up for about 2 months. Now, this is kind of in a very dark period for him. He was going through a lot of stuff. It's right before he and Val got divorced. So, but we hung out, I would say, every other day for about 2 months. And he was going to start writing with me for Fisher, or just writing songs. But his brother Alex kind of controls everything, and he runs the business, and he said no.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So all I got somewhere down in the garage, I should pull it up, especially since he died. I have a digital audio tape that just says "For Jew," Jew, his sense of humor, and it's just him just fucking around for an hour. I definitely have to find that.
That's like if I would, when I found your interview with us, and it was the first time, but you guys still close to Valerie? Were you able to check in? Because I still see the picture of her holding Aaron. It's like probably circa 2004, and Wolfgang there before he, revitalized Van Halen. He was still a kid. So were you able to check in with her, see if she's okay before we get back to the Ozzy story?
Well, I worked on a show called Hot in Cleveland with her for 4 years. So we hung out a lot. And then when that ended, just like every show, everybody, it's always like leaving high school. Everybody's like, we're going to be friends. And, every 6 months, let's all do a dinner. And then just poof, everybody's gone because they're on the new projects, or whatever happens, it happens. And I've spoken to her a few times because I did stuff for her cooking show. But I think my ex-wife talks to her once in a while, but I haven't it's been about 5-6 years now.
Okay.
But she's just owns the room when she walks in. She's a ton of fun.
Man, I've always heard good things about her. So back to what did Eddie have for you to tell Ozzy? Because now this is your spot. Like, oh, I'm meeting, Ozzy Osborne. Like, talk as a fanboy. Talk me through it.
So we were going to play Fisher again. We were playing a show in Park City, Utah, and Valerie had a house there, and she said, oh, if you guys are going to be there, I'll go up to the house and you guys can stay there. So we went up there, but Eddie told me before, he goes, Ozzy's going to be up there doing some stuff. Tell him I say hi and I miss him and I'd like to see him again. And I'm like, okay. So we do our show. I don't remember the sequence. We do our show, but then we walk into this room and it's a press conference for Ozzy where everybody gets like a minute to talk to him or whatever. And, he's got his handlers there. So I went up and I said, I have a message to say hello from Eddie Van Halen. I've been hanging with him down in LA. Boom, right up to the front. And I just remember I looked at Ozzy. I go, Eddie wanted to say, he loves you. He misses you. He hopes you're doing well. Want to say hi. I just remember Ozzy. He like leaned down, looked at me with those glasses down. He went, tell Eddie, I love Eddie, love Eddie, love him. So I just spoke with him a few minutes, and I didn't want to say, and I've never done this, but I didn't want to say, you have no idea the impact your vocals and Black Sabbath had on me, and what percentage of hearing I've probably lost listening to stuff over and over again, which brings you back to the earlier question. But he was a doll, an absolute doll, and he looked great. It's just that stuttering and the problem, and his trouble getting words out. That was a little. I'm like, guy's done more acid than there's been made acid, so whatever. He's cooked a little bit, and coke and God knows what else. So, but back to the Black Sabbath question before. I think first thing I heard was War Pigs, and then I got sucked in. But my favorite track is Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. There's a breakdown in the middle with this boom boom doo 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 boom boom doo 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 boom doo 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 doo. And I just remember thinking that is the biggest, baddest ass fucking groove I've ever heard. So I've listened to virtually every, and I still do. Depends on the mood. Like you said, my tastes run all over the frickin' map, which throws a lot of people. And it always did. I'd grow up, I'd listen to classical. I'd be in the mood to listen to classical for a night. Then I'd play some Gershwin records. Then I'd play the Beach Boys. Then I'd play Elvis. Then I'd play, Pink Floyd.
Speaking of Floyd, you said David Gilmour is probably the best guitarist, or at least has the best tone.
He has the best tone. He had a better, in my opinion, although it's a different way of playing, I think Gilmour has the best tone ever. Nobody's even gotten close. And I've seen a lot of people, they get close, but it's also the marriage of his body with the guitar that makes it cry that way. So even if you get close to, it's just astounding. And I had the pleasure after leaving Saban of working for a gaming company called Seventh Level that was run by Bob Ezrin, who had produced The Wall and some Alice Cooper stuff I was never a fan of in other bands, but he was, huge. And I would just say, what's it like? And he said, they show up at 1 and it's tea time. And then we start working around 3, and then around 4, it's tea time, and then break for dinner, and then work a bit more. He said, so it's a long process. But he said, if they just sat there all day trying to figure stuff out, maybe The Wall would have never happened. So they needed a lot of breaks, and then they'd work and be incredibly brilliant, and then more tea.
And I was curious because I know you worked with Bob. You even worked with the Monty Python guys, sorry, John Cleese, etc. Just like, who else is to you, not just us, because anybody can throw out a name, but who else is somebody that you held in high esteem? Like if I were to ever meet Eric Clapton, or rest in peace, Stevie Ray Vaughan or Jimi Hendrix, like you were talking about people that can, make the guitar meld with their body. Everyone that plays guitar has their own sound. It doesn't matter who you are. So, if I were to be with those people that moved me through that, who is somebody, singer, drummer, hell, could be even a producer. Like, oh my God, I forgot, Rick Ruben. I'd love to talk to him or meet him.
Oh yeah, I met Rick Ruben. Yeah, I've been up to his house.
Story time. I want to know that. But and then whoever else you deem big.
Well, Elton John was a huge influence because he's a piano player, and I am a pretty heavy rhythm player like him. So I don't remember how, but he was playing, I think, at the Forum in Inglewood, and I got invited. Oh, right. I knew his background singer. And I got invited, all access to go backstage. So I'm in the room with the rest of the band this is gonna kill me. The guitar player, the whole band's there. They're so cool, they're so kind. And then I'm walking down the hallway and there's Elton John. Now, to him, I would have said, you have no idea what an influence you've been on my playing. I've tried to ape your playing my whole life, and I'm pretty close, but I feel what you feel with that. But I chickened out because I was worried that if I said that to him, this was just before the show, I was worried that he might go, yeah, nice kid, and walk away, and then I'd be devastated. So I decided to just keep my distance, just kind of looked at him, he looked at me, I just kind of smiled and waved, and that was the extent of it.
Okay.
I just was fearless. Too full of fear, not fearless, fearful.
But man, what's Rick Ruben like? He is the encompass of metal and rap, and he is one of those guys that gets the music. So what was that experience like? Why did you have to go up there to his house?
We were looking, I can't remember if we were signed yet, but he had a label or something to do with the label. It may have been through Glenn Ballard, who, produced Alanis Morissette and co-wrote stuff with her. Because Glenn Ballard had wanted to sign us for some movie he was doing. There was a big battle there. But he said, Rick Ruben wants to hear you guys. Go up to his house and play a song. So driving down Sunset Boulevard, and you head up into the hills behind it, and there is a pink, I think it was a pink Spanish style mansion that's beyond my comprehension at that time in my career to even dream about living in a place like this. And we walk in and he's like, "Hi guys." He's all peaceful and zen. And he takes us into this room that could be used for a rave for like 300 people. It's huge. And it has the biggest throw rug I've ever seen in my life. The house is decked out in a goth way that is just astounding. Not records everywhere. I mean, just his decorations. It's amazing. And at one end of the room is a piano. At the other end of the room are a couple big pillows. He goes clear to the other side of the room and sits on it cross-legged with perfect posture like yoga. He says, "Play." And so we do this song, "I Will Love You," that ended up doing really well. And then he just said, "I really love that. I really love that. I want to think about this. I really, really love that. That might be one of the most beautiful things I've heard." And we left and never heard from him again. I guess he wasn't into it.
I don't believe that. I feel like,
Yeah.
He's one of those guys, he just doesn't say it to say it.
I agree. Who knows what the reasons are. There's always so many things working against and behind your back that you never really know.
I Will Love You. You wrote it. I want to say this was the one you wrote for your friend.
Yes.
That's how we touched on it. I was wondering if you were at liberty to mention his name.
Yeah, his name is Sean Jones. He tours the country and parts of the world. He's just a one-man band. He's an amazing, like way more bluesy singer.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I just became friends. I don't remember how we met. And he was crazy in love with this gal. And I don't even think Sean knows this story. I haven't really spoken to him since then. But he called me and he was devastated and he started crying hysterically. And this is the first time that a man friend has ever called me crying on the phone. And it just got to me in a way. And I got off the phone with him and because he was saying he goes, "I'm never not going to be in love with this woman. She was the one. She was my soulmate." And it took about 5.5 minutes and I came up with 75% of "I Will Love You." I just, back then I had little digital recorders or tape recorders everywhere. So when the idea would hit me, now of course do everything on a phone, but back then I had that. So I really wish I had that original recording when I was working that out. And I was surprised because it kind of came out with an Irish vibe with the da 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 da. So what I didn't finish lyrically, I handed to Kathy Fisher and I said, "Fill in the blanks." And I don't know, she was fast. The song may have been done later that night.
Just to think about that story, how quick you came up for him. Come up with it for him. Anyway, so backtracking, you're in Hollywood, you're in the LA scene, you're trying to get these bands together. And I'm curious, when did you leave home? And what was it like accumulating all that debt? Because we know the stories, it was like 4 or 5 bands.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to grind and you're learning like, okay, not everybody's really about this. Hey, man, did you practice? Hey, I was doing drugs last night, but I got you today, right now. So I want to know, because you were doing all these dead end jobs. My favorite one's everyone knows the magnet story. You were
magnets,
like screw it, and you throw a couple on the ceiling. But
yeah, I was telling my son
it.
that the other day. He's looking for a job. I said, "You can get a job counting magnets like I did."
What were some of the toughest moments dealing with that? Because the two that stick out in my mind, one is your first car. How did you light that on fire? Why did that catch on fire?
This is 61. Oh, go ahead.
And then 2, there's a story of where you were at pretty much the breaking point, almost.
Yeah.
Like you're living in a crappy place and you always left a note on your piano like, "Hey, if you take anything, please just leave this. This is my only source of income." So could you dive back into those times? Car story first, of course, but back into what you were going through, because the quote I believe was, you would tell your younger self not to take everything so serious and to mellow out. But looking back at the time you had, I'm like, I'd be freaking out too.
All right, so the car story. So because of my strict upbringing, on the morning of my 16th birthday, and I think I got to the DMV at 7:30 with my driving instructor, nailed the test, got my driver's license. He dropped me back off. I had spent the summer prior to that, like washing my mom's 61 Corvair every day. Horrid piece of shit car. So, but I had it. I got back. I started it up and drove to my friend's house. And so that honestly is when I left home.
Okay.
Now I went back home to sleep, but I was never home unless they had a gathering at the house. I was never home again. So I was gone from that point on. I already had a job, I think, as a busboy at Sizzler Steakhouse. So, I mean, I'd been working since I was 12, doing whatever to, back staying up all night during the summer and steam cleaning carpets with a friend's dad for, to make $8 or $10 or whatever. So that's when I really left home. So anyways, 3 weeks later, I'm driving this damn Corvair at like 9 at night, and I look out of the back and it's just billowing smoke, and go back there and got the engines in the back, lifted the hood. I don't know how we didn't burn our hands. I was with my friend, and damn thing's on fire. A couple guys come by that were construction workers, and they had sand in the back of their flatbed trucks. They took shovels, put out the fire, had it towed home. And the next morning, I remember hearing, my dad started it. And that sand that was in the carburetor went into all the cylinders and shredded them.
Oh.
So that was the end of that car. I was going to go in. I don't know if I would have done it right, but I planned with my buddy, we'll take the heads off. We're going to clean everything out because we know one grain of sand could destroy an engine.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, that car was toast. Sold that for, I think, $200, had a couple $100 saved up, and bought a 63 Buick Skylark that literally had brakes on one wheel, bald tires. The motor mounts were busted, so if you held your brake and pushed on the engine, the whole engine would rock. When it was, how I didn't get killed was amazing. The front wheels would break off later. I'd have to just fuck. It's unbelievable. So I had horrible cars forever.
Was it the Civic that was the first normal car, at least to get you to two
Yeah,
and
Civic. Yeah, no, an Accord. Where it had a couple thousand miles on it, and that was that was a horrible car too. I mean, the brakes, they'd made the body bigger because everyone was making bigger cars, so the brakes couldn't really handle the weight of the car, and the damn driver's window always broke and got stuck, but they wouldn't. It was just ridiculous. That was my last Honda.
So
what was the other question? I forgot. I'm sorry.
So you're starving. You've accumulated debt. You did reach on like leaving home, but now you're really grinding, trying to make it work, trying to be a musician in some form. And I wanted you to bring us back to that point because I also know I want to say you were married prior to Kathy, or you were at least dating a girl.
Yeah, a couple times. I mean, those were kind of, those were, I got married first at 21. That lasted a year and a half. We got married while breaking up, essentially. Okay. And it was just, we were as dysfunctional as a couple can be. And so that ended. And then when I was 25, same thing again, married a gal. That one lasted 8 months. And the reason that one ended is because as soon as we got married, she said, so I want a house, I want to have 5 sons, and I want a couple of sheep dogs, big dogs. And she goes, so I want you to drop this stupid music hobby because it's going nowhere, and pick a career and start making money. And I remember literally going like, yeah, right. I thought she was totally joking. Maybe not about the kids, but joking about dropping the music thing. And she said, no, I'm serious. I'm like, we didn't discuss this before we got married. And so that was 8 months, and that wasn't even a horrible breakup. I mean, I just said, I'm not. It's really my only ticket out of poverty, so it's what I have to do. There's really nothing else that I can think of that I specialize in. Certainly isn't going to be photography. I'm mediocre at best. So after that, then I remember, I know it was after that, I lived in this just shithole room with a bathroom on Laurel Canyon Boulevard in Studio City. And I mean, the paint was falling off the walls. The old brown shag carpeting must have been 30 years old, full of bugs, and just the water was kind of warm. But I had one keyboard. I don't remember if it was a Yamaha or Roland. And every time I left to go do jobs like counting magnets or whatever, I left a note on that saying, please don't take this. It's my only way out of poverty, or it's the only chance I have to make something of myself. So yeah, that was pretty weird. That was a pretty bad time. And there was times I lived there where I had to go shopping and eat while shopping, and then jump out, I left my wallet in the car, and never come back. And a store called Mrs. Gooch's a couple times where I picked some food they threw out of the dumpster. So pretty as close to homeless as I could be.
But having an upbringing where you say dirt poor a lot. At least I hope I'm saying it correctly.
Yeah, we were poor.
So you were kind of used to it, but it fascinates me that will of, I have to get out, and there's nothing left. Who, I think it was the guy at the gas station, someone would give you coffee. What do you recollect?
Yeah, Arco, AM PM mini market. I passed out in there, blacked out completely one night, because I had been living on, I would buy tortillas and a stick of butter and salt, and I would throw those tortillas directly on the stove and like warm them up, throw in some butter. So let's say that's the only thing I'm eating for 3 weeks. You're not really getting any nutrition. So this morning I went in, really sweet guy, got my morning coffee and just plunk on the counter.
Mm-hmm.
So then I learned about nutrition and blood sugar.
But then from there on out, he would always buy your coffee, and it just a fascinating story. Again, just there's so much I feel like you haven't really been able to get out due to your success. I'm going through my own struggles now, and it's like, damn, you know what? Even though you hear people saying like, oh, you got to grind, you got to be somebody's bitch and etc. You're like, until you're in it, you fully can't comprehend it. So
yeah,
while you're playing with these bands, you've expressed it before, you have anxiety. I think the only time you said you didn't have anxiety was when you were playing with Fisher with your wife, because you guys had practiced
so much
with situations like you had a beer and then you throw up the beer and then go on stage.
Yeah.
It's not like everyone has these medications now. I forget. I work at a pharmacy. I should remember it. But the beta inhibitors.
Oh, I would have given in the day. Oh, I don't know if I could have afforded it, but boy.
So what did you do to get past that? Would you just say, screw it, I'm gonna throw up and then go for it anyway? Because that.
Yep.
Okay.
It's that simple. I would go into the bathroom. Maybe I would hide from the bandmates. I mean, they knew I had performance anxiety, but I didn't want to broadcast it to, because, they were people are pretty, you're hanging out with fairly narcissistic people. And if you have a problem, they don't give a shit. What's the big deal? The typical talk, not understanding. It's like if somebody has a fear of heights and you're walking out, looking over the edge of out of a skyscraper, they can't do it or they'll lose their shit. I would never say, what? I can do it. You can do it. Compassion for what they go. So I'd run off to the bathroom backstage, throw up. So I kind of, sometimes from what I remember, you got 2 free beers for the gig. So probably drank the first one, puked that up, and then had the second one on stage with me. My God, my breath must have been wonderful.
Did you feel the second beer helps? Because I know it helps people get confident if they're not doing overkill. Like just
I was never doing overkill. And then with Fisher, I would exactly 10 minutes before we went on, the road manager would just give me a shot of bourbon.
That does help. I hate the taste, but it does help.
Yeah.
With Fisher, you guys made it. I want you to bring us back to a time, it was 94-1 or whatever. Anytime you felt like, hey, we finally got it, they rolled out the red carpet. The two things I took from those stories, excluding the business side and, standing up for yourself and literally becoming legends in the MP3 market and taking over the internet craze that is now so prevalent today, and
Right.
fights with Jimmy Iovine and etc. Two things that were said was, one, Kathy would always find a room to warm up in, a
Yeah.
closet, or etc. Everybody knows the Diet Pepsi, or is it Cola? It's got to be Diet
It was
Pepsi.
Diet Pepsi for me. Yeah.
They know that story.
That's the bond. Yeah.
So how did she figure out going in a warm room and practicing?
When I met her in the oldest recordings, she sounded a bit more like, and we were doing harder stuff. She sounded a little bit more like Melissa Etheridge, a gravelly voice. And that's because she had been in bands, I think, since she was 12 back in West Virginia. And she sang wrong. She sang with her throat, like I do, but she did it for 4 hours a night. So when I met her, I think she either was just getting or had just prior to that, she got vocal nodules. So they have to go in and then they can't talk for 2 weeks. So I think it was prior, but she still had this very raspy voice. And she had to work very hard with vocal coaches, not to learn how to sing, because she didn't want any formal training, but just how to naturally use your diaphragm instead of your throat. And part of those were the warm-up exercises. So she'd always go into a closet or a small room, and I just hear, "Nyah, nyah." It sounded, I mean, it really it's like, it makes you want to kill somebody, the sound that she would make. But that's how she would warm up. When we toured with our guitar player, Jim Cushionary, then the two of them would just sit back there because he had an acoustic guitar. I don't have a keyboard backstage. And they would just sing and warm up maybe 3 songs. And then she was good to go. And she just got better and better and better.
So now you guys on top of the world, you paid your dues, and again you're there. You finally made it. You mentioned that you were trying to get more than 15 minutes with these radio stations. Having been in that particular industry, I understand, hey, people ask the same question over and over again, you'll repeat it, etc. But you said, I started to experiment with being edgy, and that got us more time. And this is at a time where the longer you're on, the more exposure, like it's very vital for bands to survive via radio. MTV,
Vital.
with MTV, So what was your first experiment with getting edgy? What clicked in your head and said, you know what, this 15 minutes ain't shit. We got to keep this moving.
Well, first of all, no one knew we were married. So we would do morning radio. They talked to you a bit. She did most of the talking. And she was doing fine, but there was just a lack of, it didn't sound scripted, but there was just no punch to it. So, and they would say, so what's it like touring with Fisher? Is your girlfriend or wife upset that you're out on the road with this beautiful woman? And I remember one time they asked it and I said, she's a slut. And they went, whoa. And it just like, we went off. Kathy knew exactly what to do. And we went off on this, not a tangent, but she's like, I don't want to talk about that. I'm like, no, you got to talk about what happened the other night. And so between talking about the music, we just became like this very real, down the earth, conversational couple of people on the air. And so we literally went initially from 5-6 minutes to sometimes an hour, up to an hour 20. And this is morning drive time. It is the biggest time in radio. And then the phones would light up and we'd take calls and they'd say, is she really like that, Ron? I'd go, yeah. And it's just, or whatever else we could come up with. But we found a role and we started to own it until the program directors would pop their head in and say, like, to the DJs, like, come on, you can only go so far. But they also said, hey, we had great ratings. The next day we'd hear from the record company go, their ratings were through the roof. They want you back. So when we come back to whatever, Boulder, Colorado in a month, they want to see you first. They want you there at 6:30 a.m. like great.
Man, I gotta tell you, I definitely know PR program directors will run fast pace, kick in the door, stop whatever you're doing if it's that bad. You have any Philly stories? Because Philly's close to my heart. That is my second home. And I always talk about how great it is for rock. But I was wondering if you ever were there, if you had anybody you wanted to trash talk or talk nice about, fight. If you have any stories recollecting
We
on
were there. I remember that because we arrived really late at night, and it was just like this huge mecca in the distance. But I tell you the truth, I cannot remember where we played. It's that standard thing that does happen, and since I'm always looking forward, it's just one of the things I've done my whole life. I mean, as soon as I finish a project, the music for it, I don't listen to it, I don't watch it, it's gone. I'm going to reinvent myself now for this new project. So I can't remember exactly where we played. I mean, I really only remember a couple of the bigger gigs, and I don't even know where some of those cities were.
you guys have played for the president of Germany. You guys played
Yeah,
on.
that I remember.
Man, who else? What other people, because of Fisher, that you were able to play with that notable? Like if you would say like Obama, etc.
Let's see, Bon Jovi. We did a thing with him. Uh, we toured with David Gray, who
Ooh.
had, I think his song was Babylon. I can't remember. He was horrible,
Yeah,
horrible,
you did say he was a dick in the notes.
horrible. And Duncan Sheik we toured with for a while. He was really, really quite a talent, and the band was great, great, great band. And then we were going to, at one point, they were thinking about having us either open for Blues Traveler, and then they were also discussing possibly doing some shows for U2, which I would have pissed on myself if that happened.
Mhm.
But as things were getting weird because we had distribution problems with Fisher at Interscope. So
And then you had the fortitude to pull out and then start
yeah,
distributing yourself. So let's move backwards a little bit in your career. You do TV shows, and I'm calling you out. You're not a fan of the Spider-Man version, the 90s TV.
Spider-Man, radio, because it sounds like the Edge banged it out, and
So
it sounds like an afterthought.
do you believe it was the Edge of U2? Because I'm under the impression, because
I thought it was. I mean,
I think it's Joe Perry of Aerosmith from my research.
oh really?
Yeah.
I mean, I could have heard the wrong story. Doesn't sound like the Edge's guitar, that's for sure.
I'm pretty sure it's Joe Perry, but I wanted to dive into your mind. What would you have done different, or is it just the vocals that annoys you? Was it the composition?
Yeah, it's that melody because what you've got to do, just like every theme I've written, besides have now granted what he did, whoever it was, it's gimmick. You got to have a gimmick. You got to have, the hook, something that people repeat. I mean, I heard it once or twice and I was walking around all day, Spider-Man, Spider. It's just, but to me, you've got like this super action hero, people flying around, people's getting their asses kicked. You wouldn't walk up and go, that he's kicking ass, so much energy, he's so fast. You've got to like pour your fucking guts out into it. You got to make it as exciting as what you're seeing. And that was the contradiction I felt. I didn't feel it was fast enough or dynamic enough or that whoever wrote it understood what you have to do. And I know people love it. So it's just me. What would I have done? Yeah, who knows? Something like Power Rangers SPD, something like that, that just it makes you nervous, makes you like, I gotta see what happens after I hear this.
And I know that's your favorite. Like when Eddie Van Halen talks about, shoot, it's not Panama. It's shame on me because he talks about Unchained, and that's one of the times his playing makes him get goosebumps. That's how the SPD tune is for you.
I think one of the reasons I excite too is usually with vocals and drums, you find that pocket, you fit right into that pocket.
Mhm.
But on SPD, for whatever reason, I'm so on top of the beat vocally that it's like the band can't even keep up with me, and that added a real element of nervousness and energy. It wasn't intentional. It just I heard it again. Somebody had asked for a copy and I listened. I'm like, I sound like I'm coked up or something singing this thing.
So I wanted to play a quick game because I know Stanford and Sons intro song and Rockford Files. There's the two that you remember from your childhood. Little different.
Sure.
I was going to rattle off a few quickly, and I wanted you to say yes or no to whether or not they were good. If you don't know them, that's fine. Yeah, you probably definitely know King of the Hill though. But
King of the Hill is great.
All right, so Metalocalypse.
Don't know it.
King of the Hill, you already said. Beavis and Butthead.
Beavis and Butthead, can't remember it, but I think I liked it.
Cowboy Bebop.
Like it.
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld is brilliant because it's mostly vocal sounds, a lot of that stuff. The only thing that ever bothered me about it is the bass line is from "Tell Me Something Good." But that all those, they're all vocal sounds.
Okay. 2.5 Men.
Love it.
Scrubs.
Don't know.
Happy Days.
Very cute.
Okay. Like Jefferson.
I had to redo a Gary Marshall special. I did a very slow, melancholy version of the Happy Days theme for, I think it was ABC last year, and just last week, a bunch of the producers said I need it. I mean, they're using it for like tributes to their parents now. It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful thing.
The Jeffersons.
Brilliant. Okay, the Jeffersons, that energy, and there's where the Pockets found that. They're just kind of laying back. I mean, it's such a brilliant song. And what could be better? We're moving on up.
East
I
side.
mean, to the east side, to a deluxe apartment in the sky. I mean, it's fucking genius.
Big Bang Theory.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember.
And then last one, Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo. Brilliant.
All righty.
Scooby-Dooby-Dooby, where are you?
Got some work for you now. So, wanted to hit the 2018 accident. I remember seeing that on Facebook, and man, you got a Les Paul situation going on now for the rest of your life. Like, if everybody that doesn't know Les Paul is the creator of the guitar. He did multi-tracking, why we can do recordings like we do now. He experienced an accident where he was unable to bend his arm. So he told the doctors, place it in a way I can still play guitar. And Ron went through the same thing with a biking accident. You said that was one of the times in your life you're really good at knowing when your gut's telling you to do something and not to do it. And that was the time where your gut was like, don't do it. And your head was like, we have time. So the two questions I got from that was, what was the overpowering factor in your head to say, I want to take this hill? And then it's hard for people to know their gut feeling instead of their head messing with them. It's like, oh, well, on paper it's good, but my gut's saying this. How do you differentiate between this is my head thinking it versus this is what my heart's telling me?
It's a physical thing that actually happens, and it still happens every now and then. I mean, there are times as recently as last week where I was just in a certain traffic pattern on the freeway and it felt super dangerous, and I just kind of laid way back. Nothing happened, but it's like some sort of premonition came up. So when I came to that hill, the premonition, and it was just tons of broken rock and very steep. So my gut said, you're probably going to kill yourself. And my head said, but if you make it, you're a fucking beast. And since the Thundermans is now wrapped, so all caught up on work and not working 7 days a week right now. So I'm going to prove to myself, and I'd done this on all sorts of other rides. I went with a friend that's a much better rider and did downhill. We got to the bottom and he almost hit me in the side of the head. Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? You're going way too fast. So I don't know if there was what was going on in my head, but I looked at it and said, I'm going to be a beast. Made it down, I don't know, 10, 12 feet. Front tire got caught. To the left I went. And so the whole left side of my body was ripped up. Helmet got smashed in. So that would have killed me if I didn't have a helmet. And then I just looked down and I noticed my right arm was a little shorter than the left. And that this elbow was, it's still kind of deformed, but that this elbow was just a giant sack. But the arm was hanging perfectly straight. So I said, well, I never wanted to go in an ambulance, but I'll call 911. And I had no cell service.
Oh,
There was some hills and I didn't know where I was, but I knew somewhere over there I could occasionally hear shoo. So I knew there's cars over there. I'm 7.5 miles and 2 miles of brutal uphill to get back to my car. There's no way I'm walking 7.5 miles. I can't make it. So I use the bike as a walker, also because from how I grew up, I'm just for life. I'm like, I'm not leaving this bike here. This thing cost a fortune. So I used the bike as a walker and came to forks in the road and again, just went that one. I mean, and luckily found a fire road and made it to a private community fire road gate. And I was going to take a rock and try and bust the window on a house and hopefully send off the alarm to get help. And then, tell them I'm really sorry. But luckily 2 cars came in and I waved them down. It was 2 nurses. So one got on the phone and called the fire department and the other one gave me some water. I'm stuck behind the gate. And then I started going into shock. Up
oh,
to that point, it was no pain, all survival. It never really hurt, this whole thing. There's only a couple times it really hurt, but fire department showed up, opened the gate, and one of the nurses put my bike in the back of her Subaru. I got it a few weeks later. Off to the hospital I went.
yeah. At that point, I'm like, screw the bike, man. Like, come on.
I know.
How much time did you lose pushing it? But
It was an hour and a half to get to that gate.
but you did mention you needed it as a walker. So
Yeah, it did help.
would you subscribe to any religion or outside forces for not just that sparing your life, but again, just doing the research? Everything fell in at the right time, and most of the time you get the one-hit wonders, right place, right time. But for you, it's a constant. It keeps on working out. Like one time you said, like, I still don't get why the Guns N' Roses deal didn't work out, but
Right.
I'm sure down the road it will make sense. So
Right. I mean, maybe if I'd gotten the Guns gig, maybe I would have bought. I mean, that lifestyle, what those guys were doing. I mean, I'm not that, but there's a chance I might have ended up like that, and so I may be 6 feet under by now. I don't know. So I'm going to think that that's why that happened, so that I wouldn't have, had a very unhealthy lifestyle and done damage. The accident, I think, it's a weird sequence: writing the life story, deciding not to work as hard for a bit, having the crash, and then going through this just under a year of, well, I still kept going till COVID hit, but physical therapy 3 times a week, another surgery, a manipulation where they knock you out and they just try and get the arm straight, and just doing everything I could to get that function back, but a lot of sitting around because you can't do that much when you're in a cast. It gave me a lot of time to reflect. Good part is I got a lot of rest and caught up. And then as soon as I got better and I went, things are feeling better. I could still work even from day one. I was working. I was just doing everything left-handed. And then my wife and I decided to get a divorce. So that was next. And then that kind of, that at first that was very rough. And then that got a little bit better, but that was necessary because we just weren't a good match. And then things started really looking up, and then fucking COVID hits.
would you say you believe in? Is it more destiny?
There's something.
It's something.
Absolutely, there's destiny.
Okay. Because I subscribe to both ideas. There is a higher power. I'm a bad Christian. That's what I tell people. I do everything a Christian is not supposed to. but I still know, the religion in and out. I went to school for biblical studies. So I'm a firm believer there are coincidences and moments where you forge your path. And then there are times where it's like, no, there's no way. There had to have been like an angel, or God's had a form of protection. And that's all up to everyone's individual interpretation. It's subjective at that point. But
Most things that, well, first of all, I've always felt this ever since I was a kid, that it's interesting. Michael Jackson brought this up once, where he's simply channeling. It's like your brain works in a way that you receive this stuff from somewhere else, and it just kind of flows through you and you write it. So anytime I'm writing, it always feels like a gift. It doesn't feel like it coming through me. I just feel like I'm a really good satellite receiver for writing stuff.
mm-hmm.
And all the bad stuff that happens works out in the long run to be so much better, because growing up as I did, no matter how good times have gotten, still in the back of my head, I don't ever want to go back to being completely broke. So I live substantially below my means. I'm not cheap, but I just really think about. I always think about it. It's like when I would speak to people who went through the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
I'd sit with my grandparents. They would still eat, even if they weren't hungry. They would eat every bite of everything they cooked, just because they went through 3 or 4 years of nearly starving. But so there's always a reason for everything. There's always a sequence. Anything that I've gone through seems to apply, luckily, to help other people in a way.
And we've heard those stories about the people that have been abused and the people that have made it, got contracts and record deals. You're doing a video game project. You're going on 4 years. This guy, who I've yet to know his name, is a genius. Like, started working at 12, I think.
Yeah, working at 12, quit school at 15, and started making pretty good money.
Yeah, it worked for Wall Street, banks, and for his spare time, he's been doing this video game.
Yeah.
It's interesting when I see you talk about it, because I know it's slated for an October release. We'll get to the name, but when you talk
it's not coming. It's not going to be in October. We got sidetracked on another project.
Okay. What was that other project? Was it for?
It's called New Terra. It's a more of it's a smaller game for phones, but still for Xbox. It's different levels, and it's flying a rocket ship around in between these caves, and you've got to pick up and collect your fuel and all that kind of stuff. So he said, I've got an idea I want to work on. He goes, because I can finish all the programming for this in about 45 days, and we can get it out there and make some money. Because the other game, he kind of keeps deleting things and then rebuilding them better.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of been too much obsessing over that. So this other game will come out in September.
Okay.
He said August, so I'm saying September. And this one will be good. And then we'll get back to the Nothing, which we went through the soundtrack the other day. I was up at his house. We were playing the new Terra game. He said, oh, I used this track from the Nothing. And I said, I don't think that's me. I don't know who that is, but man, that's great. He goes, don't you ever even listen to your own I mean, it was me, but I mean, I'm not patting myself on the back, but that's how disconnected I get, as I said earlier, once I'm done.
Moving on.
But eventually that game will get done. It is crazy spectacular. But any one part of the city or whatever particular chapter you're in is 10 times the work of this entire other game. It's so complicated.
For the Nothing, I know you said you wanted to do more, like dramas. When we last spoke, it was more of like, if I could get a gig like Breaking Bad or something that would really expand the music. With this project, The Nothing, was that need to play that type of music or create it somewhat soothed? Because it always seems like you're looking for the darker, more
Yeah,
edgier sounds. Not saying that's 100% because we're Sabbath and metal fans,
sure.
rock, but it was more dramatic you were searching for. Do you feel like that's been appeased, or are you still looking to do more in that?
Well, I'm doing a bit more of that with this new Terra game. It's not going to be like arcade game. Some of it is, but a lot of it is it's pretty dark stuff too. The thing is I like pushing the boundaries sonically. So as opposed to layering too much stuff, now what I'm doing is I'm starting off with one sound that I really love, and I'll record these are shorter bits, so 4 or 5 minutes of the track, make it evolve a bit. I'll go, that's a great sound. And then I'll find a particular effect plugin to put on it, start chopping it up and putting it in different directions and doing pitch shit with it. So now I have 4 minutes of something that sounds completely different. Then I'll start adding a few more tracks to it, and then I'll start messing with those. So what I'm doing specifically on this game is instead of maybe 10 tracks, it's down to 3 or 4, but there's so much going on in each one that it's interesting. It's time intensive, and it works about 80% of the time. And that 20% of the time, I want to just scream because it felt originally like it was going to be so good, and it's just falling apart. So it's kind of a new process for me. But as far as the nothing, there's still a bit more for me to do. But that stuff was just so fun to just have these low grinding grooves. But those tracks have to be at least 10 minutes. Some are 30 minutes. One of them's an hour and 16 minutes, but it's always changing.
Video game music always fascinates me because of the complexity of what's happening. It's a movie. It's something that if you as a player have the guy just standing there, that music's got to go and do that loop over and over again. And then the slightest move, there's a change in the sound. With being so busy, like you've done 3 shows at one time, you know, you get up every morning and you try and work out, you have your son, you're living your life. How did you formulate this ability to multitask and be efficient? Because I know you're still into the feng shui. I can see it now, like when we talked about it.
Yeah. Balance.
How do you maintain that balance? Because you know what it's like. Hey, I got to work on this project. Honey, could you go get the kid? Okay, you know, go back to the project. Oh, shoot, I forgot to pay the bills. Okay, now I have time. Okay, I'm working on this project, but this has a 3 o'clock deadline, and the one I'm on is at 5. Okay, switching back. So how do you go about your life?
Well, the more pressure, the better.
Okay.
I'm able to look at the day and say, this is what I need to accomplish. This is when I need to accomplish it by, even if there's not a hard deadline. And so it's self-imposed rule in a way. As far as staying in shape, that's just been mandatory because for 25 years, I got some exercise. I mean, laughable by today, laughable. And so when my back started getting really bad, and then would go out and I'd have to walk into a meeting. I went into a meeting, I remember, with a cane, and I went, that's it. And I knew a bodybuilder friend that was a chiropractor. And I said, what do I need to do? And he said, this is like 2011. He said, your core is unrefrigerated jello. It's liquid. He goes, you have no muscle. So he started showing me stuff to do, and it just kind of, so I do it to stay kind of pain free, because I'm telling you, I'm 59. Almost every one of my friends, they've got like some pretty constant bad problems.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to avoid that stuff.
With that said, I know the pride of your life is Aaron.
Yeah.
And it again, another crazy damn story, man. You can't just have a normal story. It's like, oh, my son was born. No, you had to have that frightening phone call, and then you had to, you know, I think your buddy, I think he was a cop. He
Yeah, it was cop.
escorted you to get your car, and then you get the car. I don't know how you finessed, hey, my wife's in labor, I need to go, and they just gave you the keys, because I'm in Jersey. That would never happen, even if. And you know, you drive there. with that experience, and I think the thing you drove home in the writing was, this is the first time I'm holding a blood relative as an adopted kid. Do you feel that you guys, because of that, are close, or is it just he's a great guy and that's why? Because I know a lot of relationships, like the parent, the dad, the son, they butt heads as soon as 13 hits. But it seems like you guys generally have a lot to connect on. It seems like you guys get along. Like, hold on, I knew you got, look at all these canyons you've been to, Zion National Park, the Darling Wildlife Park. Like, you guys are always hanging out, and he's a celloist, so now he's gonna get all the girls.
I keep telling them, practice more, and you'll even up your game with more gals, especially after this. I mean, think about what this kid's been through. I have the accident, he's helping me out through that, and then we get a divorce and he has to go through that emotionally, and then just as he's starting to feel better, COVID hits and he's spending his life at home doing school on the computer in his junior year, the most critical year. But he and I, other than when he was, when he was very small and I had to discipline him, we never had a fight. We've never had a fight. He'll lay it out to me. If I'm doing something, just like I will to him, he'll just say, this is what I feel, which is probably why he's going to go into psychology. He'll say, I think the way you can resolve this problem is if you're not so, well, to paraphrase it, stop being so weak and just confront it. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're unhappy about this thing, so speak up and then do that. And those are the conversations we have. And then he'll show me videos of someone farting. it's all over the map. But I treated him like an adult since the day he was born, with respect. And we're friends, but it's not that parent thing where we're buddies and, I want to be down with all of his friends and, I'm one of them and I'm not going to discipline them. There are rules, but we just get along. We understand each other very well.
That's super fortunate.
So I'm so lucky. So lucky. I see what all my friends are going through. I am so lucky.
So you said he wanted to go for psychology. Does he have a school yet in mind?
No, we're just this week working on the college list.
Okay.
He's got to start doing that. He's got a few that he's looking at, but it's, not easy to get in everywhere anymore. Yeah. So we're just at the beginning to figure out. He just got his SAT today. He just took it while doing finals. I mean, I'm not claiming he's very bright, but I'm not boasting here at all, but he never studied. He just went in and took it. And we thought, well, if you tank, get you a tutor and you'll do it again. And he just got his score. He got 1380, so he doesn't have to do it now.
Okay.
So he's the complete opposite of me academically. Because if I took that thing at his age, I would have got like 75.
I don't know, because we'll go back to high school, skipping class and still passing. Maybe you're not tooting your horn enough.
Yeah, I don't know.
But again, very fortunate.
So like with my son, I knew when he was 9, whether he does it or not, I went, this kid is born to be a psychiatrist. He is absolutely born. His analytical ability in any situation, not conflicts, he hasn't been exposed to that as much, but in basic life to life stuff is handled like he's been going to therapy his whole life and like he's 30.
Right.
He just approaches it in this very logical, still with emotion, but a very logical, the right way. So ever since he was that age, I said, something you should think about. I'm not pushing you into anything. The only thing I'm telling you is don't plan on making your living as a cello player unless you love living in a 1-bedroom apartment.
With all these things and these culminations, last time I asked you, before we get to the fan questions, last time I asked you what was the best piece of advice you've ever been given, and it was always work harder. So just to switch it up, what's the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
Boy, I think it would be, it's always been why do you work so hard? You shouldn't, you don't have to, which isn't true. Back when I was being told that. And the other would be, why don't you, why aren't you literally, I don't understand why are you driving a, um, why are you driving a Toyota when you could be driving a Porsche? Why don't you spend more? I'm like, because I'm in a business that everything could stop tomorrow. And COVID was a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
It literally stopped. I had 2 NBC pilots that were shooting in 2 weeks, and everything got shut down, and those are both dead. But I mean, things can turn on a dime. So the worst advice was relax more, spend more.
It turned out crazy. COVID really did hit. If anything, I've been the most busy I've ever been in my life, which is wild. Because I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I get a weekend at home. No. I
Yeah.
started pushing 80, if not 80 hours a week, because I had 2 jobs. I was definitely sleep deprived for the first 5 of the week. But it was 9. Listen, 6 to 9 is a wild ride. 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. is a wild ride. So let's hit the fan questions. One,
All right.
why don't you have a book on your life out? And is that something that would interest you?
I've had a couple people ask that. It's nothing I ever thought about, but I don't know.
Okay.
I wouldn't say never, but maybe. I don't feel that well known to do that. I don't know if it would do anything. Not that I'd be disappointed if it sold 2 copies, but I'm not sure that I'm not sure that I'm enough of a, I hate the word celebrity, but I'm not sure that I'm enough of a celebrity to where people are going to go be that interested in it.
Mhm.
I think what I did online was good, and maybe start continuing on that, because I think I stopped right before the accident. So I'm not sure.
If not about your life, you're a master class, just start selling, because you're a one-man show, man. Like
Yeah, I thought that I've thought about that too with the master class stuff, just like, but it have to be the right group, just sitting saying, so we're going to watch this scene. It should be kid stuff. Say, so we're going to figure out what to do here, and then have them all. The first thing I would do, I thought, yeah, they would all give their suggestion. I'd go, I love what you all came up with. Oh, wait, we have a note from the producer. Here's what he wants. Okay, how are you going to, what are you going to do now? It's completely different than what you guys thought. That's number one.
Voiceovers. Did that ever entertain you? Or did you ever try and do that, since you do have to mess around with your voice, doing different octaves and singing, etc.?
The only thing I ever did was, I think I was like a deep voice on something, and then I had to be Barney Rubble from the Flintstones for Warner Brothers. They were doing an interactive game, and I was doing the guide vocals, and I decided for fun to try and ape Barney Rubble. And they sent it, and they said, that's pretty good, but we're going to have an actor do it. And I said, of course. And then they, like a week later, my friend called, he goes, we've got like 100 auditions and you sound better, so you're now Barney Rubble. So it was kind of fun, and it was really hard to get to, because you've got to really push it. I can't even get close. I don't think I could do it now. But you got to get into that high register with that. It was hard to do. Other voiceover stuff, I've thought about it, but I mean, that's a crowded, competitive world, and I don't know if I can enter into that now.
Fisher Music Inc. Is that your own label? Recording? What is that?
It's the corporation.
Okay.
The record label, which was another trick we pulled way back when, is nobody wants to sign you till you're signed. So I just started Raw Fish, Ron Wasserman, her last name is Fisher, Raw Fish Records. And we announced that we signed ourselves. And unbelievably, people started going, hey, we should talk. I hear you're signed. I mean, how stupid can you be? I signed myself. But then it got a little bit more interest. It wasn't still till the MP3 thing happened that then they were after us.
So how does that work when it comes to credits and the point system? Do you have to go through a legal with Fisher Music Inc. When you're dealing with, I think it's the ASCP or etc. Maybe that's just for music and TV, but how would the point system work for you guys?
It's just everything I do, all contracts, like a contract will be with let's say with ABC, will be with Fisher Music Inc. And then there's a loan out contract, which is the corporation taking responsibility for me, Ron Wasserman. So there's a separate addendum to the contract. So I'm hiring myself. They're hiring the corporation. I'm hiring myself, but they do all the paperwork. It's just another thing lawyers make money at.
You might want to write a book on that and help us out with that music. But two more for you. One, the legal trouble that Xmen is currently experiencing, and when the Fisher DJ was using your name. This fan, his name's Chris, wants to know, for the Xmen, what is the law on plagiarism? Is it 4 notes, or is it pertain more to the harmony? What is the law when it comes?
It's going to be 3. It's going to depend on the length of the melody. So it can be 1 measure, but the main thing you have to prove, which is why that whole case just is long gone. It got dropped. The guy, I don't know the terms of it. I actually was released from it first because the plaintiff, they called and they just said the plaintiff's just is willing to just let you go on the whole thing. And I'm like, thanks. But you have to prove access. So when a song sounds similar, I mean, in this case, even though I didn't think it was that close, but in this case and in other cases I hear, you hear 2 melodies that are nearly identical, but you've got to prove. So if you wrote a song and I wrote a song, got to prove, how did I hear your song? Now, if you had a big hit song and 5 years later I write something like later that's really close, I'm screwed. Mm-hmm. But if you like, let's say you wrote a song that only aired for a few months in communist Hungary in the 80s, before I was even doing television, and you come up with a wild story that I was in Japan and heard it from a Hungarian children's animator talking about this great live action detective show. And I, as a composer writing my whole life, said, that's great, I'm going to steal it. It's so far-fetched, and it even got wilder than that. When it's that far-fetched, you don't have a chance. So when these cases are won, it's because they show a connection. Mm. So a friend of mine had called a few years ago, and I'm not even going to mention it, huge hit song. And he said, he's the publisher, and he said, we got him. And I said, well, how are you proving access? He said, because the artist's roommate was working at the house and wrote that song, the original, there with the artist living in the roommate before he made it. 3 years later, that same melody came out. So there's your access. They live together. And that's what sways a jury or causes the big artist to say, I surrender. 99% of these cases, the public never even hears about. They're just settled behind closed doors.
It's a lot behind it. It's like the thong song with the Living La Vida Loca in it.
Yeah.
Due to Cisco and etc. So that other question, the Fisher DJ, and you were getting hate mail, and I don't know if you were getting his paychecks, he was getting your paychecks. How did you disband that?
I was getting, I ended up talking to his manager, and I said, you know what would be good? Because first of all, you're allowed to do it because it's his last name. And it was Kathy's last name. So there's no, we were first, even though the guy I never spoke to him directly, but from everything I've heard, he doesn't care. He's just not arrogant. He's just oblivious. Mm-hmm. So I spoke to his manager and I said, I am getting a ton of email for offers for like festivals for you guys. We should work something out, because they're contacting me because they think we're you because you're using our name, but that's cool. You're allowed to. And he said, that's not possible. And I said, I am getting emails with offers for your client. We should work out a deal or have Kathy Fisher do a track with him, and I'll do this. And the guy said, well, I don't think you're really telling the truth. I'm trying to help. So on all future emails, I just said, sorry, booked.
That's
well,
clever.
I am. Because they're saying, dear Ron, we would like to book Fisher at, and I said, sorry, booked.
Yeah.
I think I've turned down 40 festivals for him.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to be an ass. I made every attempt, but if you're gonna be a dick about taking the name and not say, oh, well, we should, let's figure out how to make this work, but not even believing me that I'm getting all these email offers. If you're going to tell me I don't believe that, then I'm just going to pretend that they're for Fisher, my Fisher, and I'm going to turn them down.
And that's something that people don't really realize about the industry. It's but I already said before, it always amazes me how you look on at your time at Saban. As I was in college, I was learning, and that's what got me the chops to where I am today. Yeah. But then I'm also curious about the other stories. Like, yeah, you had to have gotten a phone call from Jimmy Iovine, him cussing you out over that whole thing when you guys exploded, or you had to have dealt with somebody else in the industry.
Oh, I had, when I was recording the string sections for a song called Breakable, which ironically is the song that I was writing. Was it Breakable? Yeah, I was writing Breakable. It's what I wanted to work on the night I banged out the Power Ranger theme, and I wrote this song Breakable, which is really the reason Fisher started. But Glenn Ballard wanted to sign us to his label and have us use the track. I think he wanted to use I Would Love You, but he wanted to use that track or Breakable for some film he was doing called Clubland. And I knew it was going to tank. Just because you're a big music producer doesn't mean anybody gives a shit about your music film. Mm-hmm. The general public doesn't know who Glenn Ballard is. So I was in Capitol in the big room recording strings, and Glenn Ballard, who had offices way up, which are long gone, called me and he goes, how fucking dare you record in my studio? It's not your studio, it's this Capitol Records studio. I said, I really don't mess me up now. I want to work on this. I got to work on this. And he's just like, I can't believe you did this. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do it. I'm like, yeah. Click. If it was on my cell phone, I would have been more polite because he could call me back. But here, and then I knew the gal who managed the studio, and I said, I know you're not going to believe this, but if Glenn Ballard tries to call me again, don't put the call through. I don't want to hear it. She's like, okay. Yeah, he went from this very zen. The first time we met him at his house, he's wearing all white. He's like, welcome. He has incense and candles, but underneath, vicious, at least to me.
You're a gearhead, or a tech guy at least.
Yeah.
I've seen pictures online of like your setup, like how technology has gone from like a room full of crap to what you have now. You started a new system this year with Corona. Yeah. You wanted to learn it because everybody knows Pro Tools is the standard in radio, TV, etc. But it can be finicky. So what's the new system you're using?
Ableton Live.
What about it do you enjoy?
It doesn't crash. That alone, it beats Pro Tools hands down. Pro Tools, you run things called virtual instruments. So if I want to run orchestra, I open up an instance of a sampler program called Contact made by Native Instruments, and I'll load in, say, another company's library, Spitfire strings, put it at that. Pro Tools, I could load up like one string section and a drum kit. It's going, dude, I can't handle this load. Mm-hmm. Amazing for audio, amazing for recording vocals. Nothing beats Pro Tools. When it comes to virtual instruments, it can't handle it. And it's because they use their own proprietary plugin called AAX instead of VST or audio units. So I had used Live. I had synced it up for years if I needed like a drum loop or something to Pro Tools. So one day I just decided I'm going to start seeing how Live does to write everything. And it felt very uncomfortable, like I'm taking this huge step down to this DJ software practically. But what I found out is I can load that thing up so heavily that I can score anything. It's not really made for scoring, but I can do it. And to picture, I mean, but the thing works great. And the few times it crashes, then a window comes up and goes, hey, would you like to resume where you were? You hit yes, boom. The most I've ever lost is maybe a minute of work. And that's if I've been forgetting the save. I mean, I've tried Cubase. I've spent weeks with Cubase. I went, Logic, which is great, but still too quirky for me.
Mm-hmm.
If you grew up on Logic, Apple Logic, then you're locked in. And Pro Tools, which I still know really well, but I don't really use it that much anymore. I'll use it if I do another television show because I'll find a way to run all the libraries outside of it using something like Vienna Ensemble Pro, which is kind of a shell to hold the load, and that doesn't crash. Mm-hmm. But Pro Tools to just run instruments and be incredibly creative at any moment, it could just go like, fuck you, bye.
I can only imagine that you put hours of work into something and then it disappears and you're like, fuck. And then you got
I've had it on automatic backups, but then there were times where the backups, for whatever reason, they're corrupted. So far I've scored a ton for 4 or 5 reality shows, everything for nothing, not everything, 3/4 of the stuff for nothing. And everything I've done since, it's all done in Ableton. And it's super fast and super easy. And if I want to change automation on a plugin, I want the effect to go from dry to wet, whatever. Pro Tools, there's this whole process to set it up. And this, boom, I hit number 3, which is record, move the fader. Now it's recording every movement I make everywhere. It's just so simple.
It's wonderful. So being so busy, I know I said that was the last one, but you always make me think of another one. Being that you're so busy now, and again, you have a rate with these studios and whatnot. Back in the day, if somebody walked up to you and said, hey, could you make me, a theme song? You'd be like, yeah. And if you've done it, there's people on YouTube that still use them. But now that you're busy, it's just not feasibly possible. What would your going rate be? Like, say a studio wants you to do a show, like say somebody says, hey, could you write us a theme song? What would your rate be for that?
Whatever they dictate.
Okay.
It's the same for everybody, unless they, unless they're going to Hans Zimmer or something, which it's going to be pre-negotiated before he even hears about it, and they're going to want to put his name on, but whether he does the work or not. But with me, I'll get a thing saying, looking for a theme. Several people are submitting, which I hate, but they'll say looking for a theme for whatever, the bowling ball show. We will own all rights. We will own all the publishing. You'll keep the writer's share, and the fee, if accepted, is this amount. And it has and those fees have not gone up over the years. Okay. Because the competition is stiffer, which is why I got out of commercials. When I was doing commercials, we had a big Hyundai commercial when Fisher got signed. And because she was a singer, she was coming home to manila envelopes stuffed with checks. As the composer, through the musicians union, I got a bill for my measly amount, which I'd have to write them a check for first before they would send me my checks. So they wanted their commission first. But when I started commercials, and let's say I had a Coke spot go final, my share was 20 grand. When I left the business, it's because McDonald's licensed or wanted a track, I wrote something quickly, and the fee was $1,200, and it's gone downhill since. So, and it's usually on a commercial, it is ridiculously time consuming because it's done by committee. So they love your first track, then you have tweaks the next day and the next, and it can go on for 2 weeks. And so you're putting in an enormous amount of hours. At the end of the day, you could have made more bagging groceries at a store. So I don't like the commercial business anymore.
But you've been doing phenomenally well with everything you've done. You've been in bands, you're a superstar for music, and sir, you're an inspiration to all these people.
If that's the one thing in my life that I'm thrilled about, is that it caused some kid, even though I don't play guitar, caused some kid to pick up a guitar and try and copy what I was doing on a keyboard, or they started a band. I've heard these stories through the years. It's great. Because of you, my dad abused me, but I got a cheap acoustic guitar and just did that because I was inspired. If that ends up being, and I'm fine with that. If that's the reason I'm here and that's the gift that I get to give to people, could I be more blessed? Is there anything better than somebody saying, I did this because of that guy? I mean, that's the biggest gift in the world.
That inspiration. But good sir, I know I gotta let you go. Everyone, ladies and gentlemen, Ron Wasserman, the myth, the legend. Sir, thank you so much. And again, want to reiterate
Thank you.
something he told me a long time ago. If you love what you do, keep doing it, and you'll never be miserable. That's the short. Yep. So, good sir, thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you. You too.
And I'll see you soon. Everyone, you already know the spiel. Stay safe, be mindful, and God bless. Ninja out.